In the family group chat, my greedy daughter-in-law accidentally posted, "The inheritance split starts as soon as the mummy signs." She fell off her chair when I decided to donate all my assets. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My hands trembled as I stared at my phone screen, reading the message over and over again. My daughter-in-law Diana had accidentally sent it to our family group chat instead of whatever private conversation it was meant for. The inheritance split begins as soon as the mummy signs. The mummy. That's what she called me. Not Penelope, not Mom, not even Mrs. Wilson. Just the mummy. As if I were already dead, just a dried-up corpse standing between them and my money. I collapsed into my armchair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The phone slipped from my fingers onto my lap as a cold, hollow feeling spread through my chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Seconds later, the message disappeared, deleted by Diana, no doubt, followed by a cheerful, "Oops, wrong chat, ignore that." But the damage was done. Some things once seen can never be unseen. My son Richard immediately called. I let it go to voicemail. Diana texted 3 times. I didn't respond. What could they possibly say to explain this away? Outside my window, the autumn leaves swirled in the breeze, red and gold against the blue sky. It was a beautiful day. Yesterday, I might have called it perfect. Yesterday, I was a 67-year-old widow who believed her family loved her. I made myself a cup of tea with shaking hands, spilling hot water on the counter. As I waited for it to steep, memories flooded back unbidden. Richard graduating from college, me standing proudly in the audience, alone since Henry had passed the year before, but so happy to see our son succeed, me helping them with the down payment on their first house when Diana was pregnant with Emma, the vacation home I bought so we could all spend summers together, the college funds I set up for my grandchildren. All those years I thought I was building a family legacy. Instead, I was just funding their expectations. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Richard standing there, his expression a mixture of concern and discomfort. Diana lingered behind him, her face carefully arranged into apologetic lines. I smoothed my hair, wiped my eyes, and opened the door. "Mom," Richard started, his voice strained. "Diana made a terrible mistake. That message wasn't what?" "Richard?" I interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Wasn't meant for me to see? That much is obvious." Diana stepped forward, her eyes wide and glistening with what I now recognized as practiced tears. "Penelope, please, you don't understand. It was a terrible joke. I was texting with my sister about a movie we saw and— Stop." I raised my hand. "I'm not interested in your explanations right now." Richard's face flushed. "Mom, you're overreacting." Diana apologized. "It was just a stupid joke. Just a joke." The words hung in the air between us. I looked at my son, really. Looked at him, and wondered when he had become this person. This man who could stand on my doorstep defending his wife's cruelty rather than protecting his mother's dignity. "I'd like to be alone right now," I said quietly. "Mom, please, Richard, I need some time." After they left, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, the tea cold and forgotten beside me. I thought about all the times Diana had asked, about my investments, all the hints Richard had dropped about helping me organize my estate, the way they always perked up when I mentioned my financial advisor. How long had they been waiting for me to die? How many conversations had there been about the mummy and her money? My phone buzzed with more messages, more calls. I turned it off. That night, as I lay in bed watching shadows play across the ceiling, a strange calm settled over me. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but something else was emerging from beneath it. Determination. If they saw me as nothing but an obstacle between them and my money. Perhaps it was time to show them exactly who Penelope Wilson really was. Tomorrow, I would call my lawyer. A week passed after Diana's accidental message. 7 days of ignored calls, weak excuses, and what my mother would have called making nice. Diana sent flowers. Richard left voicemails alternating between concern and irritation. My grandchildren texted with unusual frequency, their messages suspiciously similar, as if they'd been coached. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I watched and waited. When our regular Sunday dinner came around, I decided to attend as if nothing had happened. I wanted to observe them with my newly opened eyes. I arrived at Richard and Diana's suburban home at precisely 5 o'clock, bearing my usual apple pie. Diana answered the door, her smile too wide, her hug too tight. Penelope! We weren't sure. You'd come, she gushed, ushering me inside. The kids have been asking about you all week. The house was immaculate as always, Diana's shrine to upper-middle-class perfection. Family photos lined the hallway, strategically placed to display their harmonious life. I noticed, with a twinge, how many of them I had paid for. The Disney vacation, the ski trip to Aspen, the cruise to Alaska. Richard emerged from his study, his greeting cautious. Mom, glad you could make it. My grandchildren appeared next, Emma, 16, and Jacob, 14, their faces lighting up when they saw me. Or rather, when they saw the gift bags I carried along with the pie. Grandma, Emma hugged me. I got an A on my history test, and I made the basketball team, Jacob added quickly. Good grades and achievements. The currency of the emotional blackmail they'd been taught. Throughout dinner, I remained pleasant but quiet, observing the dynamics around me. Diana controlled the conversation, steering it inevitably toward money. The Hendersons just put in a pool, she sighed, serving the salad. I told Richard we should consider it for next summer. Pools are expensive, Richard muttered, glancing at me from the corner of his eye. Diana laughed lightly. Well, we all have to splurge sometimes. Life is short. Short indeed, I thought, noticing how her gaze flickered to me. Mom, Richard cleared his throat. I was thinking we should go over some of your finances soon. Make sure everything's in. Order. Why? I asked innocently, taking a sip of water. Is something wrong? No, he backpedaled. Just being prudent. You know, estate planning and all that. Diana jumped in smoothly. Penelope, Richard is just concerned. At your age, it's important to have everything organized. At my age, I repeated. I'm 67, Diana, not 97. An uncomfortable silence fell. Jacob, bless his heart, broke it by asking about dessert. After pie, Diana suggested we look at vacation brochures for a family trip she was planning. A Caribbean cruise, 5-star hotels, excursions to private islands. When I asked who would be paying for this extravagance, she laughed as if I'd made a charming joke. Later, as I was gathering my things to leave, I overheard Diana and Richard in the kitchen. She seems normal, Diana whispered. Do you think she's still upset about that stupid text? I don't know, Richard replied. But we need to be careful. If she changes her will, she won't, Diana cut in. Your mother adores those kids. Just keep them front and center. I quietly stepped back, my heart hardening. So the grandchildren were pawns in their game. In the car, I sat for several minutes before starting the engine. The evening had confirmed everything. The loving family I thought I had was an illusion, a carefully constructed facade hiding the ugly truth. They were waiting for me to die, already planning how to spend my money. Back home, I went straight to my office and pulled out the financial records I'd been reviewing all week. The mortgage payments I'd helped with when Richard lost his job. The loan for Diana's boutique that failed after 6 months. The private school tuition for both grandchildren. I had given and given, believing I was supporting a loving family, Now I saw it for what it was. Funding for ungrateful parasites. My phone rang. Richard again. This time I answered. Mom, I just wanted to make sure you got home okay. I'm fine, I replied, my voice neutral. Good, good. He paused. About next weekend, Diana was thinking we could come look at that old china cabinet you mentioned donating. Maybe take it off your hands. My antique Chippendale cabinet, worth at least $15,000. Donating. I'll think about it, I said vaguely. After. Hanging up, I sat in the dim light of my office, a strange calm settling over me. I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, "How to change your will." The next morning, I called Margaret Sullivan, an attorney I'd met at a charity function, years ago. Not my usual lawyer, whom Richard knew. I needed someone with no connection to my family. I'd like to make some changes to my estate, I told her. Significant ones. Margaret's voice was professional, without judgment. I can help with that. Mrs. Wilson, when would you like to meet? As I made the appointment, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since reading Diana's message, I smiled. They thought I was just a helpless old lady. The mummy, waiting to be unwrapped for her treasures. They had no idea what was coming. Margaret Sullivan's law office was nothing like I expected. No mahogany desks or pretentious oil paintings. Instead, her space was modern, with clean lines and large windows overlooking the city park. The woman herself matched her surroundings. Straightforward, no nonsense, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "So, Mrs. Wilson," she said, after I'd explained my situation, "you want to change your will because you discovered your family is essentially waiting for you to die." I appreciated her bluntness. Yes, that's exactly it. And what changes did you have in mind? I'd spent days thinking about this question. What did I want? Revenge? Punishment? Justice? I want control, I finally said. They see me as nothing but a bank account with an expiration date. I want to show them I'm much more than that. Margaret nodded, making notes. Legally speaking, you have complete freedom to distribute your assets however you wish. Your current will leaves everything to your son, correct? With the understanding it would benefit my grandchildren, I added, bitterness creeping into my voice. Now I see it would mostly benefit Diana's shopping habits and their vacation home dreams. What about your grandchildren? Do you believe they're part of this expectation? The question gave me pause. Emma and Jacob were teenagers, still moldable. Had they been completely corrupted by their parents' values? They've been taught that Grandma's purpose is to provide, I said slowly. But maybe there's still hope for them. For the next hour, Margaret and I outlined a new estate plan. Unlike my family, she asked thoughtful questions about what mattered to me, not just what I owned. Have you considered what you want to do with the rest of your life, Mrs. Wilson? She asked as our meeting wound down. Setting aside family obligations? I blinked, taken aback. What did I want? Henry had died 8 years ago. Since then, my identity had been Richard's mother and Emma and Jacob's grandmother. The caretaker, the provider, the bank. I don't know, I admitted. It's been so long since I thought about just me. Margaret smiled gently. That might be the most important thing to figure out. Your assets can secure your future, but they can't give it purpose. On the drive home, her words echoed in my mind. What did I want? Before Henry's illness took over our lives, before being a grandmother became my primary role, what had brought me joy? I detoured to the community center where I'd once volunteered. The building had been renovated, but the warmth inside remained familiar. At the reception desk, a woman about my age looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" "I'm just looking," I said, hesitantly. I used to volunteer here years ago. Well, we're always looking for experienced volunteers, she said, introducing herself as Eleanor. What was your area? Photography, I replied, surprised by the spark of excitement I felt saying it aloud. I taught basic classes. Eleanor's face lit up. You're kidding. Our photography instructor just moved to Arizona. We've been scrambling to find a replacement. It felt like a sign. Before I knew it, I was filling out volunteer forms, discussing class schedules, feeling more purposeful than I had in years. We have a seniors social group too, Eleanor mentioned as she walked me out. Meets on Tuesdays, nothing fancy. Coffee, conversation, occasional field trips. You should join us. I found myself accepting the invitation. As I left, something close to excitement fluttered in my chest. For the first time since Diana's message, I was looking forward to something. At home, I opened the closet in my office, what Henry and I had once called the studio. My old camera equipment sat gathering. Dust. I pulled out my favorite Nikon, ran my fingers over its familiar contours. How long had it been? My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Mom, need to talk about Jacob's summer camp. Thinking Vail this year. Expensive, but worth it. Call me. Vail. Worth it. Of course, they'd already be planning how to spend more of my money. I set the phone down without replying and turned back to my camera. A plan was forming in my mind. Not just about the will, but about my life. They thought I was just sitting around waiting to die and hand over my fortune. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I went to the bank and opened a new account, one Richard knew nothing about. I transferred a significant amount from my main account, enough to raise eyebrows if he was monitoring it, which I suspected he was. Sure enough, he called that afternoon, his voice carefully casual. Mom, just checking in. Did you make a large withdrawal today? Yes, I said pleasantly. I've decided to do some traveling. Traveling? He sounded alarmed. Where? With whom? Don't you think you should discuss major expenses with me first? The audacity nearly took my breath away. Richard, it's my money. I don't need permission to spend it. Of course not, he backpedaled. I'm just concerned about your safety. And, well, your future security. My future security. As if he cared about anything beyond preserving his inheritance. Don't worry, I said, unable to resist twisting the knife a little. There will still be plenty left when I'm gone. Though, when? Might be further away than you think. The silence on his end was deeply satisfying. After hanging up, I called Eleanor. That Tuesday group you mentioned, is it too late to join this week? It was time to build a life that had nothing to do with being the mummy and everything to do with being Penelope Wilson. 3 months passed in a blur of activity. I barely recognized my life. Or myself. The photography classes at the community center quickly became the highlight of my week. Teaching again awakened something in me that had been dormant for too long. The enthusiasm of my students, ranging from teenagers to retirees even older than me, was infectious. Eleanor and the Tuesday social group became my sanctuary. Unlike my family, these people wanted nothing from me except my company. We talked about books, politics, travel dreams, never about inheritances or assets or who deserved what. Some Tuesdays we took field trips, art galleries, botanical gardens, even a vineyard tour. I used my rediscovered photography skills to document these outings, creating an album of memories that were truly mine. At home, I began reclaiming spaces that had been frozen in time since Henry's death. I repainted the living room a vibrant blue that Diana had once called too bold for someone your age. I converted Henry's old den into a proper photography studio. I cleared out closets full of things I'd kept because the family might want them someday. My new friends encouraged these changes. Your house should reflect who you are now. Not who you were, Eleanor told me when I hesitated about replacing. the old dining room set. Besides, it's just furniture. The family, predictably, had other opinions. You're getting rid of the dining table? Richard sounded genuinely distressed when I mentioned it during one of his increasingly rare calls. But Mom, that's an heirloom. It's supposed to stay in the family. It's just a table, Richard, I replied, echoing Eleanor's wisdom. And it's my table. The more I changed, the more concerned my family became. Not about me, about what these changes meant for them. Diana started dropping by unannounced, her visits thinly disguised as concern. Penelope, we hardly see you anymore, she complained one afternoon, eyeing my newly rearranged living room with poorly concealed dismay. The children miss you. They have my number, I replied calmly. They're welcome to call any time. They're busy with school. You know how it is. Diana sighed dramatically. Richard and I are worried about you, spending so much money on renovations. She gestured vaguely at my home. At your age, shouldn't you be thinking about downsizing? Simplifying? At my age. Always that phrase. Actually, I'm thinking about traveling, I said, enjoying the flash of alarm in her eyes. Eleanor, my friend from the community center, and I are planning a trip to Italy next spring. Italy? Diana's voice rose an octave. That's expensive and far. Is that really wise? Probably not, I agreed cheerfully, but it sounds fun. After she left, I called Margaret Sullivan to finalize the changes to my will. It was time. A week later, Richard called, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Mom, I've been trying to log into your investment account to check on those tech stocks, but the password's been changed. I'd been waiting for this. Yes, I changed all my passwords. But why? How am I supposed to help you manage things? You're not, I said simply. I've hired a financial advisor, a professional. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When he finally spoke, his voice was strangled. You don't trust me. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No, Richard, I don't. More silence then. This is about that stupid text Diana sent, isn't it? You're still punishing us for one mistake. It wasn't the mistake, I said quietly. It was the truth behind it. The call ended badly. Richard accused me of acting irrationally. I suggested he reevaluate his expectations. We hung up without resolving anything. That evening, as I edited photos from our latest Tuesday outing, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Emma standing alone on my porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I opened the door, surprised. Emma, is everything okay? She looked different somehow, less polished than usual, her face free of makeup, her clothes simple. Grandma, can I come in? I need to talk to you. Over hot chocolate in my bright blue living room, Emma confessed that she'd overheard her parents arguing about me, about money, about inheritance. Dad said you're spending everything on yourself now, she said, eyes downcast. And Mom said they needed to find a way to stop you before it was all gone. My heart ached, not for myself, but for this child caught in her parents' greed. And what do you think? I asked gently. Emma looked up, her eyes suddenly fierce. I think it's your money. And, she hesitated, I think maybe you're happier now? You seem different. Good different. I blinked back unexpected tears. I am happier. Then I'm glad, she said simply, even if it means no fancy summer camps. We talked for hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time. About school, her dreams, of becoming a veterinarian, her frustrations with her parents' materialism. When she finally left, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps one member of my family saw me as a person, not a bank account. The next day, Diana called, her voice syrupy sweet. Penelope, we should have a family meeting. Clear the air? This Sunday at our house? I agreed, knowing exactly what this meeting would be about. They'd finally realized I was serious about reclaiming my life and my assets. They wanted to regain control. As I hung up, I smiled to myself. Let them try. The mummy had unwrapped herself, and she wasn't going back in the tomb. Sunday arrived with ominous gray clouds that matched my mood. I dressed carefully for the family meeting, not in my usual comfortable slacks and sweater, but in a sleek blue dress I'd bought during a shopping trip with Eleanor. My hair, recently styled in a modern cut that Diana had snidely called youthful, framed my face. I wore light, makeup and my mother's pearls. I wanted to look strong, confident, in control, because I knew exactly what this meeting would be about. Richard's house was quiet when I arrived, unusually so. No television blaring, no music from the kids' rooms. Diana opened the door with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Penelope," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "So glad you could make it." The living room had been staged like an intervention. Richard sat in his armchair, looking uncomfortable. Diana perched on the sofa arm beside him, a united front. Jacob sprawled in the corner, eyes glued to his phone. Emma sat apart from the others, meeting my gaze with a small apologetic smile. "Mom," Richard began as soon as I sat down, "we need to talk about what's been happening." I set my purse beside me and folded my hands in my lap. "I'm listening." Diana jumped in, her voice syrupy with fake concern. "Penelope, we're worried about you. These sudden changes, the spending, the traveling, this photography thing, it's not like you." "Actually," I corrected gently, "it's exactly like me. The real me." Richard frowned. "Mom, you've been acting erratically since that misunderstanding with Diana's text. We're concerned you're making decisions based on hurt feelings rather than common sense." "Misunderstanding," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Is that what we're calling it?" Diana shifted uncomfortably. "It was a stupid joke, Penelope. I've apologized repeatedly." "A joke?" I nodded slowly. "So you didn't mean it when you referred to me as the mummy? You weren't actually discussing how to split my assets after I die?" The silence in the room was deafening. Even Jacob looked up from his phone, sensing the tension. "That's what I thought," I continued. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a moment of truth." Richard cleared his throat. "Look, Mom, families talk about inheritance. It's normal. It doesn't mean we don't love you." "Does changing my passwords mean I don't love you?" I countered. "Does redecorating my house mean I don't love you? Because that's what you're suggesting. That my independence somehow negates my affection." "It's not about independence," Diana interjected. "It's about responsibility. You have a duty to this family." "A duty?" My voice remained calm, though inside I was seething. "What duty would that be? To finance your lifestyle? To die conveniently and leave everything to you? That's not fair," Richard protested. "No, it's not," I agreed. "It's not fair to treat me like a bank account with a pulse. It's not fair to teach my grandchildren that my only value is financial." At this, Emma shifted uncomfortably. Jacob finally put his phone down, his expression confused. Diana's facade cracked. "You're being dramatic. We've always been there for you." "After Dad died." "After Henry died," I corrected. "You visited twice a month, usually when you needed something. Richard called weekly, mostly to check on my investments. You all expected Christmas and birthday gifts, college funds, help with down payments. But did any of you ever ask what I wanted? What I needed?" Richard's face flushed. "That's not true, isn't it?" I looked him directly in the eyes. "When was the last time you invited me over just to enjoy my company, not to discuss money or ask for something?" His silence was answer enough. Diana stood up, her patience visibly thinning. "This is ridiculous. We invited you here to discuss your reckless spending, not to be attacked." "My reckless spending," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You mean my money, being spent by me, on things I enjoy? Money that was supposed to be for this family's future," Diana snapped, finally showing her true colors. Richard grabbed her arm. "Diana, don't— No, let her finish," I said. "I want to hear exactly what she thinks my money is supposed to be for." Diana's eyes narrowed. "Your husband worked his entire life to build that estate. Do you think he'd want you squandering it on photography classes and trips to Italy with some woman you just met?" The room went still. Even Diana seemed to realize she'd gone too far. I took a deep breath. "Henry wanted me to be happy. That's what he told me before he died. Be happy, Penny. Not make sure Richard gets everything, or save it all for Diana. To spend. Just be happy." I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "And for the first time since he died, I am." Richard rose as well, his expression conflicted. "Mom, please, we can work this out." "Yes, we can," I agreed. "And we will. I've made some decisions about my estate. I'd like you all to meet me at Margaret Sullivan's office next Friday at 3 p.m. "Who's Margaret Sullivan?" Richard asked, confusion evident. "My lawyer," I replied calmly. "I've made some changes to my will." The effect was immediate. Diana gasped. Richard's face drained of color. Jacob looked up, suddenly interested. Only Emma seemed unsurprised. "Changes?" Diana's voice was barely a whisper. "What changes?" I picked up my purse and headed for the door. "Friday, 3 p.m. I'll text you the address." As I reached the door, Emma hurried after me. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I'm proud of you." I squeezed her hand, touched beyond words. At least one person in this house saw me as more than a walking checkbook. Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation I'd dreaded was behind me. I had spoken my truth. Now they would face the consequences of their actions, and I would face the future on my own terms. Margaret Sullivan's office seemed smaller with 5 additional people crowded inside. My family sat stiffly in the visitor chairs. Richard and Diana together, Jacob slouched beside them, Emma slightly apart. Eleanor, my unexpected ally, sat near me, her presence a silent statement that I wasn't alone. Margaret moved efficiently through the legal formalities, explaining that we were gathered for the reading of my amended will and trust documents. I watched my family's faces as she spoke. Richard's forced neutral expression, Diana's barely concealed impatience, Jacob's boredom, Emma's quiet attention. "Before we begin," Margaret said, "Mrs. Wilson would like to say a few words." All eyes turned to me. I'd rehearsed this speech for days, but now that the moment had arrived, emotion threatened to overwhelm me. I took a deep breath. "For most of my adult life, I've put this family first," I began. "When Henry died, I thought my purpose was to preserve his legacy for you. I believed that meant financial security, the house, the investments, the trust. Funds. I thought money was the most important inheritance I could leave." Richard shifted uncomfortably. Diana stared at her perfectly manicured nails. "I was wrong," I continued. "The most valuable legacy isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in dignity, in independence, in self-respect." I looked directly at my son. "In teaching the next generation what truly matters." Richard couldn't hold my gaze. He looked away, his jaw tightening. "I've realized I still have a life to live. My life. Not as the mummy waiting to be unwrapped for her treasures, but as Penelope Wilson. A woman with dreams, passions, and value beyond her bank accounts." Diana flinched at the mummy reference. "Good. I wanted her to remember. So I've made some changes." Margaret took over, her professional tone a stark contrast to the emotional tension filling the room. She explained that I had established a new trust structure. Most of my liquid assets would be donated to 3 causes: a scholarship fund at the community college, a photography program for disadvantaged youth, and a senior support network that had helped me rediscover my purpose. Diana gasped. Richard's face flushed red. "The house will be sold when I decide I no longer wish to live there," Margaret continued. "The proceeds will be split between the same 3 charities." "This is outrageous," Diana burst out, unable to contain herself. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted calmly. "It's my money, Diana, not yours. Never yours." Richard put a restraining hand on his wife's arm, though his own face showed barely controlled fury. "Mom, you're making a mistake. A terrible mistake." "No, Richard," I said quietly. "My mistake was teaching you to value what I owned more than who I am." Margaret cleared her throat and proceeded to the next section. "Mrs. Wilson has established education trusts for both Emma and Jacob." At this, Diana's head snapped up, a calculating gleam in her eyes. "These trusts will cover their college expenses with some conditions," Margaret explained. "They must maintain a 3.0 GPA, perform community service hours each semester, and, importantly, the funds will be paid directly to their educational institutions, not to their parents." Diana's expression soured. Richard stared at the floor. "In addition," Margaret continued, "when Emma and Jacob turn 25, they will each receive a modest trust fund, provided they have demonstrated financial independence by then. They must be employed and self-supporting for at least 2 years prior." Jacob finally looked interested. "So we still get something?" "Yes, Jacob," I said gently. "But you'll have to earn it, just like your grandfather and I earned everything." "We had." Emma caught my eye and gave a small, approving nod. "As for the remainder of Mrs. Wilson's assets," Margaret said, "she will retain control of them for her living expenses, travel, and personal enjoyment during her lifetime." "And after?" Diana couldn't help asking, her voice sharp. Margaret's smile was cool. "After Mrs. Wilson's hopefully very distant passing, any remaining assets will go to the charities already named." The silence in the room was absolute. Then Diana stood up, her face contorted with rage. "This is elder abuse," she hissed. "She's clearly not in her right mind. We'll contest this." Margaret's expression didn't change. "You're welcome to try, Mrs. Wilson. But I've taken great care to document Mrs. Penelope's mental competence, including assessments from 2 independent physicians. I should also mention that Mrs. Penelope has instructed me to counter any contest with a complete revision removing all family benefits entirely." Diana's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Richard stood up as well, his face ashen. "Mom," he began, his voice a strange mixture of anger and desperation. "This isn't fair." "Fair?" I repeated. "Was it fair to call me the mummy? Was it fair to wait for me to die so you could spend my money? Was it fair to teach your children that a grandmother's worth is measured by what she leaves behind?" He had no answer. "This meeting is concluded," Margaret announced. "Unless there are questions about the technical aspects of the documents." No one spoke. Diana stormed out, Richard following close behind. Jacob trailed after them, looking confused. Only Emma remained, her expression thoughtful. She approached me slowly. "Grandma, can I still come visit you? Just to visit, I mean. Not for anything else." I hugged her tightly, tears pricking my eyes. "My door is always open for you, sweetheart." After they left, Eleanor squeezed my hand. "You did it, Penelope. How do you feel?" I considered the question. The confrontation had been painful, but necessary. I'd seen my son and daughter-in-law's true faces, the naked greed, the fury at being denied what they believed was rightfully theirs. It hurt deeply, yet beneath that pain was something unexpected. "Free," I said finally. I feel free. 3 months later, I stood on a terrace in Tuscany, camera in hand, capturing the golden sunset over rolling vineyards. Eleanor laughed beside me, raising her wine glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said. "To living," I replied. My phone buzzed with a text. Emma, sending photos from her first semester at veterinary school. We spoke weekly now, our relationship stronger than ever. Richard had called once, a stilted conversation that ended with him asking if I'd reconsidered. I hadn't. Diana never contacted me again. I heard through Emma that they'd divorced a year later, the financial strain too much for their materialistic marriage. As for me, the woman they once called the mummy was more alive than she'd been in decades. I'd found not just new friends, but a new purpose. My photography was featured in local galleries. I volunteered with seniors and taught classes at the community center. I traveled. I lived. Standing there in the Italian sunset, I realized that Diana's cruel message had been the greatest gift I'd ever received. It had forced me to unwrap the bandages of obligation and expectation, revealing not a dried-up corpse waiting for death, but a woman with passion, purpose, and many years of living still to do. The last laugh, as it turned out, was mine.